Alright, so this is the alphabet that we use today in English. It is not perfect for us since our language has more sounds than 26, but that's more likely because it was not meant for English. Back in Old English or Anglo-Saxon, the language used different symbols for words called runes, but that's a topic for another video. The alphabet that we're using now is actually the Roman or Latin alphabet. I prefer calling it the Latin alphabet since I'm more used to calling it that. That's right, this alphabet we're using is meant for the Latin language, which has just enough letters for the sounds in that language. So where has the Latin alphabet come from? Well, let me tell you the history of the Latin alphabet, simplified so you can at least follow along easily. We begin the history in Egypt of northern Africa. Back then, the ancient Egyptians used symbols called hieroglyphs to write their language. There were more than 1,000 hieroglyphs written, and each would represent sounds or words. When people from outside tried to use this writing system, they had problems on figuring out what the words meant. It was then eventually when the hieroglyphs were to be more like a small subset of Egyptian symbols reused by standing for the first sound of the word they represented. This creates the Proto-Sinaitic script, which eventually became the Phoenician script. The Phoenician script became one of the most influential writing systems in history. It spread across Western Asia, the Mediterranean, and perhaps even farther. The folks from Greece of southeastern Europe got the Phoenician script and tried writing words in their language using the script. However, there were issues. The Phoenician script is not an alphabet, it is an abjad. An abjad is a script without vowels, unlike an alphabet where it contains both vowels and consonants. This is not a problem for the ones back in the modern-day Arabic-speaking nations, which they still use abjads to this day. But Greece is a language that contains vowels and would be hard to spell words without vowels. Also, the Phoenician script had more guttural sounds that would come from the throat and back of your mouth, like ah, ha, and ah, which the Greeks would not need since their languages never had those sounds. They decided to use some of those letters with guttural sounds to be used for vowel sounds instead so that it is easier. This would become the Greek alphabet we know now. In the West, the Etruscans from modern-day Italy took the Greek alphabet to use it themselves. The civilization of the Etruscans have spread throughout Italy, and eventually, the Roman Empire happened. The Romans got the Etruscan alphabet, which then would spread all over Europe, knowing how big the empire was at the time. And boom, the Latin or Roman script is born. Although it only had fewer letters until they added X, Y, and Z later to easily spell foreign words, more likely from Greek at the time. That also explains why they are the final letters in the script. We still need to add some letters to the script to make it the alphabet we know today. Firstly, there was no letter G because the letter C used to make a K and G sound at the time. Just one more stroke and we got the letter G. Secondly, the script contains C, K, and Q, all letters with the same K sound. That was because they were used differently before specific vowels in words. The fact they existed at all would probably be because of the confusion with the consonant, mostly guttural, the Greeks took from the Phoenicians. Archaic Greek had the letters gamma, kappa, and kopa, which the Etruscans tried fixing the usage of them until the Romans used it the way I mentioned. Also, originally, the Latin script had 23 letters, so we're missing 3 letters still. J and U were added later as variants of the letters I and V. V used to make an U sound. The Romans never had a V sound until much later on, meaning U and V were the same letter, explaining why they look similar. The letter I used to make a vowel and consonant sound, E and Y. Common example of these letters coming into play is in the name Julius, as in Julius Caesar. It was spelled IVLIVS and pronounced Julius or Julius. Because of this issue, J and U were created to differentiate the pronunciations from their original forms, I and V. One more letter left. You may have noticed that the Romance languages that evolved from Latin, rarely use the letter W. It's usually the Germanic languages that use it, and that happened for a reason. Back in the Old English-speaking days, the Anglo-Saxons decided to take the Latin alphabet the Romans use, and they can write words in their language. Old English had a w sound, but notice that none of the letters were used to make a w sound at all. So as a sort of reference point, the Anglo-Saxons placed two U's or V's together to make a double U or double V. Remember that this was during the time when U and V were the same letter. Eventually, that became standardized to make the w sound, and the Germanic languages were able to use this new letter for their sound. Even though nowadays, Germanic languages like German and Dutch shifted to the v pronunciations, probably from some events that happened in those areas. The name is used variously in different languages, some calling it W and some calling it double V. Calling the letter W for us English speakers, or maybe even other languages in general, is sort of strange nowadays, since it has more syllables than all the other letters in the alphabet. My point still stands that we should use a second name for referring to this letter, and I mentioned it in my updated English alphabet series and give it the second name of Win. In case you knew not, Win is an old English rune that was used to make the w sound, just like our W now. We could have brought it back, but it looks too similar to the Latin P, so I think just bringing back the name for their current letter would be useful. All over Europe, the Latin script would be used, from the Germanic languages to the Romance languages to the Uralic languages, in Czech and Polish. However, there was a third alphabet that was similar to Latin and Greek's. It's the Cyrillic alphabet, named after disciples of Saint Cyril and Methodius, who first created the Glagolitic script to translate religious texts for the Slavic people. The Cyrillic script was a simplification of Glagolitic, combining Greek letters with the new characters for Slavic sounds. And now a majority of Slavic languages use the Cyrillic script. Anyway, the Latin alphabet is the most used script in the world, and you might see it anywhere you go now. In Africa, languages like Swahili, Yoruba, and Zulu use the alphabet. In Oceania, languages like Hawaii of the USA, Maori, and Tongan use the alphabet. In Asia, languages like Tagalog, Malay, Vietnamese, and Indonesian use the alphabet. You may see places in China and Japan use the Latin script to translate some of their usual scripts for tourists, or for helping learn the language. Yeah, it's everywhere now. It's insane now how the alphabet we use now was of origin from Egyptian hieroglyphs. Languages always evolve, but even the scripts we use to write them, and the alphabet you're reading right now, carries a history stretching back thousands of years. Okay, and I'm done.
This is a track that I made just to avoid that copyright claim. There is no way you can report me. This isn't copyright, so you can't report me. Do I have to rhyme all the time? No, I don't. I don't need to rhyme. Rhyme with itself. Rhyme with